Dessert person, ricotta cake. Take one. Hi everyone, I'm Saffitz. Welcome to my home kitchen. Today I have a recipe for you from the archives. This is a dessert person recipe. It is a ricotta cake. In the book, it has a kumquat marmalade. Today I'm serving it with strawberries. It is a beautiful blank canvas for all of the seasonal fruit that you're seeing at the farmer's market. It is such a delicious and easy cake, and I'm so surprised I haven't even shown it to you yet. There's many different kinds of ricotta cake. This particular version there's flour, so it is a cakey sort of texture, but it's also super light because I lighten it with beaten egg whites. It's one of those cakes that rises super tall in the oven, and then as it cools, it falls. So it is supposed to fall, and it makes this kind of cool crater in the middle, and you can fill it with whipped cream and fruit. I'm just gonna cut slices and serve them with some macerated berries. It's very, very easy. So ingredients for the cake. I have 2 cups of ricotta. This cake works great with your basic, sort of entry-level grocery store ricotta. And it's 2 cups, so you can just get one of those 16-ounce tubs. But if you can find it, it's good to use a nice sort of high quality, local handmade ricotta. Sugar, I have a cup that's gonna go into the cake, an extra tablespoon that's gonna go into whipping my egg whites to help stabilize them, and then a little extra to toss with my strawberries. Some all-purpose flour, a lemon, I'm gonna go zest in the cake, and a little bit of juice with the berries to serve. Heavy cream, a little bit of salt. I have just a little bit of butter for greasing the pan. 4 eggs, which I'm gonna separate, plus an extra yolk, some vanilla extract, and that's it. This is such an easy cake. There's just one annoying thing about it, which is that it uses 2 pieces of equipment. It first uses a food processor. That is to basically blend and whip the ricotta, which starts to work some air into the mixture. So it is kind of necessary. You could do it in a blender. And a mixer for beating the egg whites. 2 pieces of equipment, but it comes together so fast, and the equipment does all the work. First step of any cake recipe is to preheat the oven. I have mine on 375. Make sure you have a rack in the middle, and actually I don't think that my rack is in the center of the oven, so let me move that real quick because I broiled something. Nope. Okay. Then I'm gonna prepare the pan. The recipe calls for a 9-inch springform pan. If you have a 10-inch springform pan, but it calls for 9, or you have an 8, or you have one size different, you can still use it. Just know that you are going to have a thinner or thicker cake because you're using the same volume spread out over a different area. And you have to adjust the bake time accordingly. So this is actually not quite a springform pan. This is a very old pan, but it has a removable bottom, so it's basically the same. I have a piece of parchment paper that I cut to fit in the bottom. So I have a little bit of butter here, and I'm just gonna use my fingers. It's kind of room temp. And I'm gonna butter just the very bottom of the pan. So just smearing a thin layer of that room temp butter. Then my circle of parchment paper is gonna go on. And I'm gonna butter the parchment, but I'm not buttering the sides at all. So the reason is because I actually want the cake to stick to the sides. So this is a cake that rises super tall in the oven and then falls, as I mentioned. And when you don't grease the sides, you get the cratering in the center, but you don't get the entire cake falling evenly. So the sides stay kind of tall, and then it makes this sort of dip in the middle, which I really like, so you can fill it with fruit or any kind of topping. And it's good to sort of give the cake something to grip to on the sides of the pan. So don't grease the sides. And I'm just greasing the parchment enough to help it release. And the only reason I put butter on the pan is to help the parchment stick. So that's that. The next step is to put together the batter. It comes together very quickly because, as I said, your equipment does all the work. So I'm gonna start by, this cord is short so it doesn't come over here that far. The first step is to process together the 2 cups of ricotta and the 1 cup of heavy cream. It helps if the heavy cream is cold. So this is gonna go into, switch hands. This is gonna go into my food processor. What I really like about this cake, unlike other types of ricotta cakes, is that you don't have to strain the ricotta. So straight out of the package is fine. It's kind of a bummer to like wait 12 hours or 24 hours for it to strain. There's just no need to do that. So then I'm adding my cup of heavy cream. And the first step is really kind of whipping and processing the ricotta until you have something that's incredibly silky and smooth, and that doesn't take that long. Okay, so turn this on. It's gonna get really, really thick and like incredibly smooth. So maybe 30 seconds or so in the food processor. Next, we're gonna add our other liquid ingredients. So I'm gonna add my sugar, a cup, lemon zest. So I'm gonna save the rest of this lemon for squeezing some juice over the strawberries. Then I'm gonna add a half teaspoon of kosher salt. I have more salt here because I'm gonna add an extra little pinch to my egg whites. My 1 extra yolk. I'm gonna add a little bit of vanilla also, 2 teaspoons. Because it's such a kind of like pure cake, it's like a lot of just flavor from the ricotta and the lemon, a little bit of, I'm adding vanilla extract, but if you had like a vanilla bean and you wanted to add like a little bit of a scraping from a vanilla bean, that would be great. Paste is also great. Okay, so I'm gonna separate the eggs. I'm separating the eggs because the yolks are gonna go into the ricotta base, and then I'm gonna whip the whites. I haven't made this cake in a really long time, but it kind of was, I think, like a favorite of the testers. Remember when I was testing Dessert Person? It's just a kind of perfect canvas. That was my hope for how people use Dessert Person, and to a certain extent What's for Dessert, was that people would learn that in that back section where there's like the kind of foundation recipes, that you can use the book to kind of like build your own recipe and put things together. So that was sort of my aspiration, and that's how I use it. Okay, so eggs are separated. This recipe, because there's no butter in it, and I'm not like creaming butter and sugar and adding eggs, it's not that important that your eggs are room temp. And also, little tip, it's always easier to separate eggs when they're cold. You have like you're less prone to break the yolk, so they don't need to be room temp. So now I'm just gonna process this again until it's smooth. So you could see that like around the sides of the bowl, everything is homogeneous. The last step in the food processor is to add my flour. And now at this stage, I'm just gonna incorporate the flour. I don't need to like process it. This is just about mixing it well. You can pulse this in. Okay. So you need 2 mixing bowls for this, one for holding the batter, the larger one for folding everything, and then another one for whipping the whites. If you're using a stand mixer, obviously you just use the stand mixer bowl for the whites. So I'm done with the food processor. I have that ricotta batter base, looks great. Now I'm going to whip my egg whites. I have my hand mixer. For 4 egg whites, hand mixer is very capable of doing this. I'm going to start by adding that little extra pinch of salt to the whites. And I have just that 1 tablespoon of sugar that I reserved. So anytime you're beating egg whites, it actually does help if they're room temp. So if they sat out a little bit after you separated the eggs, that's actually good. And it's good to start beating on a lower speed, and it just helps to break up the whites, which tend to sort of hold together. And you can increase the speed. And they start off obviously like liquid and translucent, and I'm just kind of gonna beat them until they start to get frothy and foamy and look white and opaque. And then I can sprinkle in my sugar. Is it less rattly if I put a towel under it? Okay, so now I can start adding my sugar. I'm not making like a meringue here. I'm not like making a souffle. You don't have to be like too precise or careful. Just sprinkle in that sugar and increase the speed. And I want to take these, I have to double check what the recipe says. Stiff peaks, medium peaks? Twin peaks? Firm peaks, okay. So I'm gonna beat this until I have a firm peak. Had to double check, make sure that was right. Anytime you're doing egg whites, I always give the same rules of thumb. They never change. It's like you want to make sure you have no bits of yolk in the whites that can inhibit whipping, because it's like there's fat in there. You want to make sure the bowl is clean. It's always sound advice not to use a plastic bowl, because even if you thoroughly clean a plastic bowl, it still retains some residue from fat that was in the bowl previously. So glass or metal is better. You don't want to overbeat. Yeah, we're good. Firm peaks. See them? I'm going to add my egg whites to my ricotta base. So now time to just fold these together. It's helpful to use a large flexible spatula, and it's just this kind of turning motion, turning of your wrist and turning of the bowl. And you're kind of scraping down along the bottom of the bowl. You're bringing the thing that's on the bottom onto the top, because we don't want to deflate all the air that we just worked into the whites. So you want to continue to fold until you see no streaks, or maybe just like a single streak. You know, you don't want a lot of unincorporated egg whites, but you also don't want to overmix. So this is looking really good. It's nice and homogeneous and evenly mixed. I'm going to put it into my prepared pan. You'll notice that there was no leavening in this cake. There's no baking powder, baking soda. The egg whites are the leavening. That's adding all the air. And as it bakes, all those tiny little air bubbles of egg whites expand under the heat, and you get this great rise. Okay, I made a little bit of a mess. I'm gonna smooth the surface, obviously with my offset spatula. Okay, this is gonna go into the oven. This is gonna bake at 375 for 40 to 45 minutes. It's gonna get nice and like deeply golden brown all over the surface. And the cake should have a little bit of a wobble when you pull it out. So the cake has been in for just about 45 minutes. So at 40, I checked it and needed a couple more minutes, but it's done now. It smells very delicious in here. So you can see that it's nice and golden brown across the surface, and it's like cracked and risen. So this is done. When I shake it, do you see that little bit of a wobble in the center there? So, but when I press on it, it's nice and springy, so I know the eggs are cooked. This is done. It's just gonna cool off. So again, it's already starting to fall. You can almost like see it happening, and that's normal. So we know that that's gonna happen. So while this is cooling, because it does need to cool completely in the pan, I'm gonna cut up my strawberries. These are already rinsed. I'm just gonna hull them. And I like, when I cut strawberries, I like to slice them if they have like are decently red all the way through. These could be definitely way better. I'm probably cutting these like a 1/4 inch thick. You could just chop them up, that's fine too. However you like to do it. Obviously use the best strawberries you can find. And you could also do this with any kind of macerated fruit. You could macerate, when I say macerate, I mean just like you basically mix it with a little bit of sugar, and extra liquid is optional. I'm adding lemon juice, but sugar draws out the juices. So you could do this with blackberries. You could do it with cherries that you cut in half and like pull the pit out of. You could do stone fruit, like sliced peaches. Plums would be great. So it's really, because it's just like lemon and the kind of creaminess of the ricotta, it works well with pretty much anything. So I'm just gonna finish slicing the berries and then toss it with a little sugar and lemon, and then we just have to wait for the cake to cool, and then we can serve it. So my cake has cooled. It's like ever so slightly warm on the bottom, but basically it's room temp. I'm gonna now cut around the sides. So remember, we didn't grease the sides of the pan, so you do need a little tool, an offset spatula, a butter knife to cut around the cake to loosen it. So the cake has all these cracks on the surface. That's normal. If you don't like the way it looks, you could fill the top of the cake. You could like just serve it with the strawberries already on top or whatever fruit you're using. You could do whipped cream. I'm not going to do whipped cream because the cake is so creamy. Like it already has that texture that I want. So I'm going to leave it as is. I kind of like the way that it looks, but it's totally up to you. I like that it looks pretty rustic. And now we can serve it. So you can take it off of, I have that piece of parchment underneath, so you can just use that to help you get the cake off of the base, like so. All right, now I still have the parchment under there, so just be aware of that when you're cutting. It's so like springy and light. I'm very excited. So I'm gonna cut a piece. So you can see what it looks like, the texture. It's light and custardy and creamy, but it's still, it has like a little bit of a crumb to it because of that flour that we added. So now strawberries on top. Again, this is just not a cake that really needs whipped cream, and like that takes a lot for me to say that because whipped cream is like my favorite food and I love it so much, but the cake itself is so creamy and smooth. And if you want, you can drizzle, I have some nice juices, drizzle some of that over. And that's it. Easy summer dessert with summer fruit. You know, it's a great dessert for people who don't like cheesecake and don't want like the density of like a New York style cheesecake, but that ricotta, it gives it sort of that cheesy richness, but it's still so light, delicious. That little bit of lemon zest is so brightening. It was so funny when I was thinking about what I wanted to make. It's summertime, like I knew I always wanted to do something fruit focused, and I was looking back through the books and saw this in Dessert Person. I actually had to search my own channel to see if we had done ricotta cake because I was surprised that we hadn't shown it yet. So it's really fun to kind of go into the archives a little bit, go back to Dessert Person from so many years ago and show you a recipe that I love, haven't made yet, and haven't made myself in a while. So if there's any other recipes from Dessert Person that we may have overlooked, let us know in the comments. And check out the book. Also, What's for Dessert? I'm plugging my own books. Gotta sell some of those. Always fun to revisit a favorite recipe from Dessert Person that I haven't made for a while. So anyway, thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And buy the book if you want to.